Artful evening. Please take a moment now to silence your cell phones if you haven't already. And also, if you've not already, I hope that on your way out, you will pick up a RAT card for our Clearly Indigenous event that is happening on August 10th. This is going to be a day-long celebration of the exhibition Clearly Indigenous. We have a lot of exciting programming going on all day, both here and at Glass Art Kalamazoo, so you're not going to want to miss it. Please pick up that RAT card and you'll be able to get more information about that event on our website. So before we begin tonight's lecture, I'd like to take a moment to share the KIA's Land and People Acknowledgement, developed in collaboration with the Michigan Transformation Collective, while also acknowledging that statements like these are a starting point and not a destination. We honor and pay our respects to the land on which we stand and its traditional stewards, the Anishinaabe, the Council of the Three Fires, which includes the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi, also known as Ottawa, Chippewa, and Potawatomi tribes. We also acknowledge the people of African descent who were stolen from their land and separated from their families through the enslavement Holocaust, and pay reverence and respect to them for building this country's infrastructure and economy with no compensation or reparations to date. Now it is my honor to introduce Seth Thomas Sutton, who joins us this evening to speak about Indigenous art and activism and artifacts as well. So Seth is an Emmy-nominated Métis artist and scholar. He holds master's degrees in both visual and cultural critical studies from Kendall College of Art and Design, and is currently a professor and chair of the Arts and Humanities Department at Montcalm Community College. Seth is a member of the Native American Advisory Council at Grand Valley State University and is also the head of the Sugar Council for the Montcalm Community College. Seth has worked on 2 collaborative documentary films for WGVU, projects that highlight West Michigan's vibrant Indigenous communities, along with their artwork, lifeways, social and cultural activism, and food reclamation. He was among the first Indigenous-based journalists to document and report on the Dakota Access Pipeline protest at Standing Rock. Seth has published several scholarly essays in academic journals, and his first full-length publication, The Deconstruction of Chief Blackhawk, a critical analysis of Mascots and the visual rhetoric of the Indian, was published in 2021. He, I believe, actually has some copies here. So Seth is also a professional commercial artist and a photographer. These are only highlights from a very long list of accomplishments, but you didn't come here to hear me talk. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Seth now. Please join me in welcoming Seth Thomas Sutton.
Sounds awkward hearing the resume. Bonjour. Hello, welcome. Thank you for coming. You also didn't know that tonight we're also going to do a little bit of language learning, okay? So, yes, my name is Seth Thomas Sutton. I'm a professor from Montcalm Community College. I do hold degrees in visual and critical studies. And I am currently the chair of Arts and Humanities at Montcalm Community College. So they allow me, they put up with me to do the things that I do. And why I'm here. I'd like to thank the Kalamazoo, first off, the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts and Miriam for reaching out to me and asking for me to come and speak to you all. So it's a very great honor. So thank you very much as well. So I would normally start out my lectures or my speaking engagements. I would always speak in the language, Anishinaabe language, Anishinaabe Mwin. Ani buju na newe maganadak manga na urum manga nanibwik nandej the cost manga dodam nin da ow nor store band waganak single dawak nundunjaba apachigo miguech bizendawi egnongom. So first off, what I said was hello, all of my relatives, right? Because we are all related. I introduced myself in the language, which is standing wolf. I come from the wolf clan, Manga Dodem, Nin Da'ao. It's my mother's heartbeat. It's where I come from. And Waganakasing Odawak Ndunjaba is also the third part of how we identify ourselves, of the land in which we come from. The Waganakasing Odawa, the Little Traverse Bay Band of Odawa Indians, the North Shore Band. There are 9 bands within the Little Traverse Bay bands. So, and then I said, Apachigo Miigwech, Bizendalia Ngongom. Thank you so much for coming out and listening to me talk. I hope that you will find tonight's topics as invigorating as I do, and slightly frustrating, actually. I'm more frustrating than invigorating. I'm not really sure. It's kind of like the jury's out, right? But anyways, so Bonjour, hello, great. See, we'll get there. All right, Indigenous art and activism. That's a really heavy term. Art, what is art? I'm a professor of art history, visual and critical studies. Visual studies is the art part. I probably would identify myself or more closely align my disciplines with philosophy or theory, rather than being although I have several degrees in physical, like practicing of arts and BFAs, I have went the way of so many artists trying to figure out this eternal question: what the hell is art, right? What is it? And then when we toss in this other word, activism, right? We have this idea of what activism is, or what it should be, or what it could be. But I don't know if we really stop and take the time to dissect what these things actually do. It's an act, right? They're physical acts that we do and manifest. So what ways can art, I guess, or through this activism, what ways art can foster change within society? Because that's ultimately the root of what activism is what we kind of colloquially think of what activism is, right? It's something that needs to be changed, and us as a society, or our, not use the microphones, concentric circles, right? We decide that something needs to be changed, and we put that energy, and we put all of our effort and energy into that change. And for the most part, right, positive aspects and positive changes happen through this social activism. Yeah, but then there's still that word art. Yeah, what is art? How do we use it? What about art can we look at as a way to critique society as a whole? I think a lot of people, in particular my students when they come in, haven't had a lot of exposure to art, what art is. Typically people think, again, just this overgeneralized concept, art is something that's on a canvas, it's on a wall, it's a sculpture, right? It's paint on canvas, it's just the thing, it's the stuff, the things that we see in the dentist office, the stuff that we see in the gallery. And I'm not saying that the stuff that we see in the gallery and the dentist office are the same quality. Oh, but is it? See, that's the thing. You shake your head no. The thing about it is it's art. You can't argue with the fact that it's art. At some level, we have to figure out what this kind of definition of what art should be or what it could be. And I think that's the invigorating thing, is because you look at something that everybody's like, what? And all of a sudden, when the bells go off, everything, the veil is lifted. So let me give you a little bit of context to what we're going to be talking about. In my research visual studies, we want to start taking a look at the idea of, in particular for me, art and artifacts. We're going to be looking at a few different things and talking about a few different things tonight. The first part of the evening, I would like to do a little bit of thought exercise and run through some visual analysis of actual artwork and activist artwork, so we can kind of compare and contrast and see how these things play out in real life. And then I would like to show you what I'm really geeked about as of late in some of my new research that I've been toying with, is my new book that's coming out. But ultimately, the concept of what we're talking about is the Indian, right? This idea of indigeneity. And for so long, we have to fight against this stereotype or this preconceived idea of what the Indian is. And I'm saying that the Indian doesn't exist. There is no such thing as an Indian, regardless. There's no such thing as a Native American. There's no such thing as an Indigenous American, right? These are all of these false and hollow signs. And when I say signs, I mean the visual idea of what an Indian is. If you say the word Pocahontas or Tonto, you say certain things, the Washington Redskins. And I'm going to use probably some harsh language tonight, but it's only in an academic purpose, in academic settings. I don't particularly like some of the words that we'll be using. I don't ever say the word Indian. It's usually always air quoted. But these are these tropes and the commodifications and the fantasies of what indigeneity actually is within our society and with our country. And it is really just used for subjugation and for exploitation. So I am using the idea of rejecting our common concepts of these things as a way of academic activism, right, within art. And then we're going to use an artistic lens to kind of view some of these things through. So these are just kind of a chart, and if anybody would like, I'll have all of my contact information afterwards. If anybody would like any of this information, you can always reach out and ask. But this is just a chart that I put together to kind of show what semiotics, this idea of the visual conceptions of what an Indian actually looks like to us. Simulations and representations are embedded in the minds of the viewers, and they operate as the real sign. Again, this is a lot of confusion was, I think, brought about by the fact that these European mindsets of what indigeneity is or was, they started to replace the actual factual knowledge and the factual presentation of humanity. And then when these images perpetuate over time, they just kind of galvanize into the minds of society. So when I say that they operate as the real, it is the idea of looking at like Western movies, having all of the, let's say, antagonist characters, right? The Indians, cowboys and Indians, of course. They all have leather buckskins. They all have long braided hair, right? They all have feathers. They're all riding horses. And it is a conglomeration and this composite image of really two basic groups, kind of the Dakotas in the plains and then the southwestern tribes. That it really came from a pragmatic, practical kind of outcome in the movies when it was black and white, early days, right? We have this dichotomy, the oldest dichotomy known to humanity is this ubiquity of black and white, good, bad, right? Good and evil. The good guys, right? Gene Autry always wore a white hat. And who wore black hats? The bad guys. Why? So you could easily depict them on screen. Well, they're in the movies, they're not going to have 575 different variations of an enemy. So it's just a very practical, easy, if we put them all in the same outfit, in the same costume, we can show them as the generic bad guy. And that's just stuck. The long braided hair with headbands, right? Stuntmen can't fall off horses and keep their wigs on. So what's the easiest approach? Stick a headband on them, right? To tie their wigs on. So over time, these are the signs, these are the real ideas of what we think Indians or Native Americans are, because we see them in the TV, we see them in the movies, and it's real to us, right? And as generations removed, it just continues to build and grow. But the thing is, these aren't static. They don't stay the same over time. These new simulations, they're introduced. These simulations of reality. And if you haven't yet to see the exhibit I just walked through just before speaking, it is amazing. And I actually found, when I show you some stuff from my new research, I found a piece that is definitely going to go in my book because I have a thing about totem poles. So But they're both introduced by Indigenous and non-Indigenous people, right? And that is something that we're going to explore. It's called the third space, and we'll explore that a little bit later. And kind of the general intentions is of what I'm doing and why we're doing this really is I want to break down these sociological and these psychological and ethical understandings of the continued use of derogatory images and artwork, in particular to define what indigeneity is. Again, to deconstruct the colonial American ideologies as a way to examine the construction of the myth of the American identity and to identify an identity that is based on subjugation of Indigenous populations. But more importantly is to develop a new critical lens in which to view and to deconstruct these types of artworks so we can help foster more of a robust understanding within society. I think that is the idea of my theory background, is we need to have new lenses in which to look through these things. So that's the academic side. Let's get into a fun thought experiment, if you will. Let's take a look at a very famous painting. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with this. This is 1872, John Gass, American Progress. Is anybody familiar with this painting? Has anybody seen it in real life? You should. You should.
Where is it?
I'm sorry? In a book?
Where is it?
I don't. It's in Washington. Give me a minute.
Okay.
I don't know. It's somewhere in there. It's in the back of my brain. So, this is American Progress. When it works. Let's just, to read an image is just like reading a book, right? Narratives, images are the same thing. Text is language, right? When you write a word on the board, it's not just language, that's art, that's an image, right? Those things mean no more to us than white paint or red paint on a canvas, right? So we can look at that and we can use those same kind of ideas to look at images and decipher and see what's going on. So let's take a look and we will go opposite. We will go from right to left. But if we see, because this is the main focus here, right? This is Olympia. We can see the Star of Olympia, and she is carrying, this is Manifest, the angel of Manifest Destiny, right? Hmm?
No.
Oh, you can talk.
I just said that's what I figured.
Yeah.
The whole context.
Right, and she is carrying, this is difficult to read here, but it says school book. She's also carrying a telegraph wire. But let's take a look here. We have the sun peering over the horizon, a beautiful sunrise coming, these clouds. It's going to be a beautiful day. We can see bridges here. We can see ships. We can see colonization. We can see capitalism and economic progress. We can see the train tracks coming through here, multiple avenues, right? The cabins. We see here people plowing and tilling the earth. As we move and we expand into the countryside and push out the natural environment. So that's what we see, this elk, or it's probably an elk, running off of the edge of the painting, right? If we continue our eyes over here, we see a group of prospectors. Although, if it's interesting, you can almost identify that this is a blue Union soldier and this is a Confederate soldier, signifying, this is 1872, right? Obviously, after the Civil War, the country is coming together again, so we see brothers reunited, right? They're hunting. We see this bear. This is an interesting bear, though, as we see it, because I don't know if anybody's ever hunted bear or seen bear, but it has its teeth shown in these really nasty claws, right? Bears don't do that. They're hunting it, but what are they trying to do? Now, we have this thing in art, proximity effect. When two things are closely related, they're next to each other, they mean something, right? They're meant to go together. Peanut butter and jelly, or peanut butter and cheese, anything that you like. Let's just pop up right here. What do we see? We see the only group of indigenous folks here. We see bare-breasted women. We see warrior, and probably we assume to be a chief on the horse, running, right? Clearly staring at Olympia and being fearful of progress. We see the stagecoach. We see wagon trains. We see wagon trains here. We do see some indigenous movement or activity. Looks like dancing. But what are they telling us, right? We see the skeletons here, right? They're dying off, right? Purposefully. They're pushing all the buffalo. All the wild horses are coming off. We see the Sierra Nevadas, the mountain ranges, the Cascade Mountain ranges, right? And then we see just a little bit of the ocean. Dark clouds, ominous, right? It's American progress, right? Only through the Christianized Western lens of education and religion, gentrification, capitalistic economies, can you actually have manifest destiny happen, right? You can have this land, which was rightfully ours to take as far as the colonials were considered, right? And it had been talked about prior to America being conceived. John Adams was writing about manifest destiny well before, okay? So now the interesting thing, this is art. This is in history books. This is a very ubiquitous image. Here's one that's not so much, but this is from Charles Hilliard, talking about un-American progress, 2021, right? Flipping this around. Sometimes we'll call this post-colonial, but I have a problem with post-colonial theory because post means, well, it's something that's done, right? Post-colonial, post-colonization. Well, I contend that colonization is still very much a part of the American fabric. It is just augmented and changed a little bit. But what do we see? We see the same ideas, only if you remember the last one where we had the nice bright sunrise, look at the effects of global warming, right? The Dakota Access Pipeline, all of these, the Keystone XL Pipeline, all of the indigenous activist groups and environmental groups, indigenous or non-indigenous, it really doesn't matter. You know, this is what we're talking about. The river is on fire. There's smoke. It's terrible. Going back to the buffaloes coming back, right? Indigenous populations, the wolves were driving things out, but we still see the black snake here. We have this push now towards green energy. We have this push towards this activism, environmental activism, right? Which is just another form of gentrification and colonization because they're just taking indigenous lifeways that we've been doing for time immemorial and putting into policies now like it was their own idea, right? So these are ways to push back and fight against the narrative. Let's take a look at a precedent, where these things come from. So George Catlin, a very predominant painter, came to America, and you probably have seen a lot of his work without knowing it. But George Bird was another one that was a very famous painter as well. But this particular image I find to be really telling. This is Weeju John, Pigeon Egghead the Light, going to and returning from Washington. It's a mouthful. Long names. But in this, you're not seeing two images stuck together. It is one image. It's a diptych, right? There's two images. This is Pigeon Egghead, okay? This is him going to Washington. You can see here in his very elegant drab and garb, his regalia. You see a pipe, his feathered war bonnet, all of the telltale signs of what an indigenous person is. When he returns home, he is gentrified. He is in American-ish clothing, or European-style clothing, rather. He has traded his war bonnet for a top hat. Still has a feather plume, right? Instead of a pipe here, we show his plug-in. We see a cigarette, a fan rather than a fan of feathers. They're all trappings. We see white gloves. He's very elegant. Epaulets on his shoulders. but it's kind of dark to see, and he does this on purpose. Back here in his pockets of his waistcoat, there are 2 empty whiskey bottles. Right? So he's setting an idea and a precedent up for who and what this person is always going to be capable of. It is that passive-aggressive idea of like, hey, you can be as good as you want, but you'll always be a drunken Indian. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is pigeon's egg something that any indigenous person would have ever been named, or is it meant to be pejorative?
Okay, so Catlin, and we're going to look at another one from a photograph from Edward Curtis. Most of them we don't know, because much like Catlin, they would fabricate their artists, their models, rather. They didn't look indigenous enough. Guess what? They would be painted to look more Indian. Oh, you need tattoos and more piercings. Oh, you're too much. So let's take some tattoos off, right? They would change clothes. George Catlin would take a prop trunk around. See, here's the thing. He would take sketches. He would take sketches of the people and then go back into the studio and paint from rough sketches of models. And you would have stand-ins, Europeans, actually pose, right? When you look at some of these, and when you start really researching George Catlin, you'll see that most of his figures are all in a European contrapposto pose, which is no indigenous person would ever stand, posed like David, right? So you start noticing these things. We also get this idea, the concept of the Roman nose as well, right? Because, well, it's sexual proclivity in a European mindset. So all indigenous people would be constructed or made to have an elongated nose or a larger nose. Why? Well, because they're wild savages. And wild savages are this really exotic, erotic fascination to the Western mind at this point in time, right? So let me show you. Let's move on to another one real quick. This is Edward Curtis, right? And this maybe will answer or come to answer some of your questions. The Vanishing Race, the Navajo from 1904. It was first published in his North American Indian in 1907. So the North American Indian, Edward Curtis, what a troubled guy that he is. He was an artist. He was not meant to be an ethnographer. But in the 19th century, ethnography was really not a thing. So anybody could kind of slap a title on themselves and call themselves an ethnographer, right? And take ethnographic photographs. So he was actually a failed photographer, studio photographer. He moved from Minnesota out west to try to restart anew. His family fell apart because he was a terrible photographer. He was an avid outdoorsman, though. So he was out walking in the mountains one day, completely by happenstance, stumbled upon 12 stately gentlemen in tuxedos out in the middle of the mountains, lost. He effectively walked them back into civilized society. Come to find out they were Roosevelt's cabinet members. So, as a thank you for saving his cabinet members, President Roosevelt assigned Edward Curtis his first professional photography job in Alaska to take photographs and document the peoples of the Northwest Territory. Here's Edward Curtis's start as an ethnographer. Over 30 years of his life he spent taking photographs. He has more than 40,000 daguerreotype glass prints of indigenous people and some 267 early films that we unquestionably regard as factual, because we see them in the Smithsonian, we see them at the museum in Muskegon. If you have yet to see that, go to Muskegon. They had a great exhibit. Great. I mean, yeah. So, but we don't question it. We just, it's a photograph. Photographs tell the truth, right? That's what we see. So, the vanishing race, the Navajo. Well, what we see is this really, Edward Curtis came up in this time of what we call pictorialism, and he's really based his influences off of the Impressionists in Europe. Monet, Cezanne, he loves these guys, right? And Curtis talks about when photography first came around, he's like, we need to figure out how to meld and marry art and science. And through the medium of the camera, can we make art physically a science now? We can take this beautiful object of reality and turn it into art. He had no reservations about telling the truth or not telling the truth. He didn't care. He, much like Catlin, also took around the prop trunk. Some 40,000 plus images. We see about 11 to 12 outfits within photographs. Whoa. We don't know that. We don't pay attention to that. How many do you really pay attention to the clothes that people are wearing in photographs? No, you don't. And especially if it's something that you're not familiar with, oftentimes you would see them mislabeled. For example, the Navajo. They don't call themselves Navajo, they call themselves the Dene. We'll get to that in a second. So, pictorialism is this really soft, dreamy, drippy, out of focus squishiness, right? It has a dreamlike quality to it. That's what pictorialism really is. And that's what he's trying to achieve here. It's all in silhouette, it's backlit. Well, why? Because they're unidentified people. If you show their face, you humanize them, right? At this time within this country, the vanishing race, that was a real, colonization had taken place. And, shit, we're gonna kill them all. We gotta save them now, right? And this is the idea of kill the Indian, save the man. But we need to do something, in other words, we're gonna completely eradicate an entire group of people. Not that they cared before, but all of a sudden now they have a conscience. But that's what this is. This is a sympathy photo, right? Because it's not, you're not talking about an individual person, you're talking about the entire race as a whole. They are going off into this really dark, ominous black background, so much so that they literally are vanishing because you can't tell where the next one ends here, right? It's very deceiving. But what does this tell you? If you were to look at this not knowing anything, right, in 2024, looking at that vanishing race, well, word vanishing means that they're gone, right? Or they are going to be gone. They're going extinct. They're on the endangered species list, right? Okay, so activism, another one. Let's take a look at this thought experiment. This is by a Dene artist, Navajo, right? And this photograph that Will Wilson took in 2012 is a direct conversation with both George Catlin's Pigeon Egghead the Light and the vanishing race. Well, why? Obviously the diptych quality, okay? We see, much like, Weeju John in Catlin's image, we see two variations of seemingly the same person, but they're vastly different. And then obviously with Curtis's The Vanishing Race, well, why do I say it? Well, he's Dene, and Navajo don't call themselves Navajo, they call themselves the Dene. So obviously they're not gone, they didn't vanish, they're still very much here. Okay, so let's talk about this. Here we see Will Wilson in a very ethnographic style pose. We see, right, this profile. We always see that because we want to see bone structures. We want to see what this race, quote unquote, race of people look like and how they're different from Europeans. We see his traditional hair tie in the back. We see this, it's not exactly a squash blossom necklace, but it's something very similar to their cultural style. They are all in turquoise to accentuate his indigeneity, to accentuate the savagery. And then he's looking at himself here. And aside from like the phenomenon of Yellowstone now and everything is cowboys and cowboy hats, but he is dressed as a ranch hand, right? He has a white cowboy hat. What do we talk about? Good guy, right? Yeah, well, because here he's not. Here he's just the savage. Here he's civilized. He has a shirt and tie on. He has a vest on. The trappings of right? Modern civilization. He has a glove on, just like Visionette Weiju John did, right? Now, he doesn't have whiskey bottles, but this image is saying the same thing that George Catlin said about the Weiju John image. Does anybody want to take a stab? Why? And where? What in this side here tells us that no matter how affluent he becomes, educated or civilized he becomes, he'll never be anything but a savage.
Got a white glove.
Yes, but why? What about the glove?
To show that he's trying to integrate it in that society? I don't know.
What's your name?
Normal.
Norma? Nice to meet you. Close, yes. Go ahead.
Well, I think
Yeah.
it's a leather glove. It is white. It doesn't look like it's ever touched soil or wood or an axe or a horse rein. But it's a work glove.
Oh, yes. Who said that? Who said the word glove? Okay. It's a work glove. And although you are correct about it's not a white cotton glove. It is a leather work glove. So no matter how civilized, I can wear a shirt and tie and vest and a convoy hat, I'm a good guy, I'll never have a white cotton glove. I'll always be relegated to a ranch hand, to a worker, lower level, lower status, right? That's why he has it up here, so you can see it, right? This is
Why does he have a tie?
because civilized men in society wear ties to professional occasions. I mean, it's summer, so I'm not. I was going to, but I didn't. I opted for this aesthetic. Because it's attracting to civilization. Gentlemen wear suits and ties. Right? I mean, so they say.
Exactly.
But this is, a really good conversation piece. All right, moving on quickly. This is a crow photographer, crow artist, Wendy Red Star. I absolutely love her work. So Edwin Bailey, this is an example of just kind of this 19th century, studio photography, very, very typical of the day, of course. This is Princess Angeline. That was the name given to her. Her actual name is Kikasablu. She is the last daughter of Chief Siatla. So she would have her photos taken and sell them on the streets to tourists.
Wasn't that a thing though, that in the process of gentrification, certain indigenous people wanted to embrace that to try to fit in, and then they did all these westernized things?
They did because, capitalism in our economy does not allow for the socialist life of indigenous kind of mindsets, right? So when you're scraping by and people are interested, we'll talk about that in a second. We'll circle around to that. But I just wanted to show you what Wendy Red Star is doing. She is taking these studio setups and putting them into a context where she's talking about kind of the silliness of them. Now, this doesn't have a lot of, it has, the trees and this waterfall, but look at the next. She has just a plethora of work that I absolutely love. Hold on, I'm gonna come back to that one. This one's called, these are ones, a few images out of the Four Seasons, right? Where she is taking a cardboard deer, right? Plastic flowers, and setting this up into this is just a really crappy background. She makes no effort to polish her work. She wants to make it look plastic because this is the commercialization and the commodification of indigeneity, right? And of indigenous cultures. This is what people expect, though she is wearing her traditional regalia. This one's fall. This one's summer, or excuse me, that was summer. This was fall with the blow up elk. Right? I love her work. She is hilarious. She has one called The Last Supper. right? And it's a play off of Da Vinci's work. I'm not going to show it because I don't want to offend anybody, but if you are interested, I'm sorry?
What's your name?
Wendy Red Star. So this was the image I had skipped real quick. This is just another one, just kind of setting up what Wendy does, like trappings of indigeneity. So this is kind of a treachery in images. This is Edward Curtis taking, this is the original photo. And this is the one that was published, right? Aside from the color variation, that's just image scanning. It's the clock that's missing. Why? Why would they do that? That's right. Indians they can't tell time. They have no concept of, what this is. Why would there be a clock there? Have to take it out. Why? Because that's not within the fantasy, right? Okay. So this kind of sets us up for art and activism and all of the things, right? Now, I want to talk about ways that we, what's your name? What was your name?
Deborah.
Deborah? Okay, Deborah brought up this idea of what we call the third space, okay? And this is really the project and the focus of my new project, the inauthenticity of the souvenir and tourist trades. Really what it is this idea of, well, what is, or re-identifying what is Indigenous identity? What does that even mean? But it's really this idea of cultural hybridity. We have two or multiple competing cultures, and out of it it's the Venn diagram. In the middle where those circles intersect, there's the third space, right? We have European and Indigenous, and in the middle somewhere we have to survive. So a lot of things ended up this way, and my focus is, in particular, I do everything within the Great Lakes Basin region, right? Because this is where I'm from. So I want to talk about the place and the people that live here, the places that I find this hybridity, right? So a lot of you might be familiar with this. A lot of these places that I'll be showing, but this is anybody been here in the UP on two? Yeah, right? We've been past it for years. In particular, I was asked by Bullfrog Films. They are a longtime educational documentary film production company to review and help out with a couple films about Beyond Being Silenced, and is really the upper Northwest tribes and totem pole carving, and kind of configuring what totem poles were, and then moving into this new idea of what totem poles, again, quote unquote, totem poles can be, and how they really impact modern idea of their culture, and Hidatsa in particular. So I find that totem poles really, to me, are this weird thing. We didn't have totem poles here in the Great Lakes. But interestingly enough, totem poles, totem is our word, dodem. You just put T's in the D's, and totem, dodem, it's all the same thing, right? They're clan poles. But if you look at any Lego set, any kids games, any video games, or anything that has anything to do with Native Americans, movies, you'll see teepees, birch bark canoes, and totem poles, all kind of into the same thing, right? And it's like that. I love when I see movies of the Southwest, and they have birch bark canoes in the Southwest. Well, where the hell are they? What are they gonna do with those? Where do they get birch there? But these are the types of things. These are not. I guess the idea of tourist art and artifacts in the 19th century, we have these things in the 18th century, the grand tours in Europe, where people would go, and I'm thankfully, and this is not a disrespect thing, because usually when I talk to my students about curio cabinets, yeah, look at all you people shake your head, yes. Usually kids are like, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? Okay. Cabinets of curiosity, curio cabinets. The thing, what I always tell my students, the thing that Mima has with all the knickknacks and the spoons and the plates, they're like, oh yeah, it has a name. Yes. Okay. So this is a holdout from Europe. They would go on this grand tour and they would travel the world, right, if you were wealthy enough, and they would bring back all these artifacts and trappings and the things and the knickknacks, right, from the different countries and different places and cultures that they would visit. They would come back and they would put them all together in one room, and that was called a cabinet of curiosity, right? They weren't cataloged, they weren't organized, they were just stuck, right? And people would come over and they would go into their parlor and they would show them all of their stuff. Look at how smart and well-traveled I am, because I have things, right? Oh, okay, so the tourist trade is very much in the same way. We haven't changed much at all. We still go and buy snow globes that say Canada, right? And we still buy little refrigerator magnets when we go places and knickknacks and things. Well, the idea when you go to an exotic foreign land or foreign body like a reservation, right? You buy baskets, you see pottery, you see indigenous artwork, you see totem poles, little things, right? So this is a souvenir postcard from St. Ignace, 1950, Indian village. It is still there, right? You can still go in and buy Minnetonka moccasins, right? With the beaded Thunderbird on them. You can have a authentic indigenous experience playing adventure golf, right? Because we invented golf. I don't know if you knew that. Not Scottish people. We did. Right? We see cigar shop Indians. We see all of the same types of things. Now, let's look at, let's look at some stuff. Now, dream catchers, dolls, t-shirts. I'll show you some more. Hand-carved canoes, pottery. I'm pointing at it. I should probably use the pointer. I mean, did we use pots? Did the Anasazi make Pueblo made pottery? Beautiful pottery. Absolutely they did. Amazing pottery, right? Did they do it to sell? Did they do it for trade? No. Well, why did they make it so ornate and beautiful? Well, because in the best terms as I can say, it's you have respect for your creator, you have respect for yourself. So if you make something, you put everything that you have into it. You make it beautiful. Why? Because the creator gifted you the ability to do this thing. It has nothing to do with anything else after that. It's respect, right? Okay, but then you go to an exotic land and you want something. How much is that? Well, it's not for sale. Well, let me buy it from you. Well, so now we have capitalist economy, kind of market economy, thrown into something that shouldn't ever have been equated. Well, that's an interesting thing. So then we start making, well, all right, I don't have time to make like this. I'm going to just make a bunch of small ones because they won't know the difference. I can charge $5, $20, whatever, $400 for a little thing, right? And you have this memento, this fetish to memorialize your time there. And it is a fetish, right? It is something that you can hold and you can possess the knowledge and you can possess the feeling of their culture because I own it now. And I can stick it on the shelf and I can easily go up to it, take it, look at it. Oh, yeah, cool. And then stick it back and completely go back around my day and it doesn't affect me. So, is it art? That's the question. Is it really art? Is this activism? Okay, so we can argue both sides of this, but what I will contest is that even though the inauthenticity of some of these things that we're looking at, it is, you can't look at this, which I took a picture of from Hobby Lobby. You can buy these at Hobby Lobby as well. You can buy medicine bags. So the problem occurs, though, when you are making something, you're making something. Is it art? Is it craft? Is it pottery? You know, what are you using it for? Why are you making it? And in some ways, like Southwestern jewelry, turquoise, right? Red coral. Is that really a traditional Zuni thing to do these things? Maybe, maybe not. But they have adopted it because, quite frankly, if that, this sounds crass, but if that puts them in the radar of people, then they're not forgotten. They're still here, right? You can go and buy black ash baskets, right? And those artists, that culture is still relevant and still prevalent then within society, right? It may not be the factual aspects of that cultural group or identity, but it's something. It's better than nothing, right? Which is what we've been fighting against since colonization.
Who owns these shops?
I'm sorry?
Who owns these shops?
Well, this is Zubler's Indian Craft Shop in Houghton Lake. They have a little sculpture park.
No, I meant who owns them.
Yeah, is it a white guy?
Oh, yes, most definitely. Right there. But this is the interior. Note the awesome mannequin here. So, I'm just going to run through a few things. Horseshoe Falls and Gift Shop. This is in Munising. I want to read you this. Oh, that's that handsome fella right there. You know him. My wife was taking pictures of me taking pictures of totem poles because that's all I did on that vacation. So a totem pole, or rather the spirit it embodies, contains the essential spirit of the individual or family it commemorates. Totems were used by Native Americans to tell stories of their individual family, clan, kinship systems, accomplishments, dignity, prestige, and adventures. Totems are regarded as a group symbol, also serving as a reminder of the family ancestry. That sign is here, right, next to this guy, like that totem pole. So, which is just a series of similarly the same heads, right? Really having nothing to do with the idea of family, clan, or kinship whatsoever, unless you knew who Frank, Bob, and Steve were, right? Because that's who they are.
You know what I think is really insidious about that? This is white people's effort to not be racist.
Right. Sure. But then this Canadian hemlock attains a height of 60 to 80 feet, diameter of 24 to 36 inches. The coarse-grained wood is used for building. The bark contains tannin used in tanning. The Indians made a brew from the bark called takuna. I don't know. It's not my language. And made their white captives drink it in the belief that it would turn them red.
Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
Where's that at?
Munising, up in the UP. It's the same place, the Horseshoe Falls. But we can see different aspects. The Hiawatha, of course, right? Longfellow. And then if anybody's ever been to Baraga, Lance area, this is the Bishop Baraga Shrine and Museum. Now, this monstrosity is 67 feet tall, overlooking the bay, right? Keweenaw Bay. I mean, that's all you can see is this giant snowshoe priest. And I was his nickname, the snowshoe priest, right? Frederick Barriga. But this is the entrance. This is what it was. This is the newer version. They repainted it. I took pictures. I just wanted to give a reference. If somebody's seen it this way.
Wait,
But
but
you-
any idea why when they repainted it, did they add the crosses?
Because, well, it's Catholic.
Oh,
It's a Catholic bishop
yeah,
shrine,
got it.
right? But the idea that we have snowshoes, because that was his nickname, the snowshoe priest. And then here, these traditional like water lilies and Anishinaabe kind of floral motifs, as opposed to just the generic arrowheads, diamonds, right? We try to make it a little bit more localized. This is an train. You can have an authentic Indian camping experience in your very own teepee with bunk beds and banana ferns, carpet. It's great. It's great. It's great. But it's got a nice dream catcher there. Hold on. All right. So, oops.
Couple.
Yeah. Huh?
Couple.
Yeah. It's good stuff. So this is the research that I'm exploring. Now, I wanted to very specifically play with the differentiation between non-Indigenous tourist tracks, right?
Yes.
Tourist sites versus like that first image that I showed you in say Ignis, that is Indian owned, right? So they're both doing the same things. They're both contributing to the same false narratives. That's a frustration, right? But how do you tell, or how do you talk about this new kind of formulation of indigeneity or indigenous identity from tribes who are just trying to keep afloat, right? So it is problematic, but the idea, hopefully what I'm trying to achieve or trying to accomplish by talks like this is to bring some light to what we're looking at and why we're looking at it. So when you see something, it's not just, oh, that's a pretty painting, or oh, look at the basket. Like, look at it and then try to figure out, is it meant for Indigenous people or is it meant for tourism, right? Okay, so then if you start looking at it that way, then you can start seeing, well, if it's meant for tourism and it's made by an Indigenous person, is it a form of activism? Now, there is an interesting, there's a documentary that I worked on called Beyond Being Silenced. Robert Davidson is a Hidatsa totem pole carver, or totem carver, and he is doing contemporary, doing it right now, recarving totems and issuing clans that have been lost for hundreds of years. I think the film that I was working on, that was the first pole that community had seen in 250 years. So he's bringing art as a way of, as an activist, to bring kind of prestige back to that culture. Like, this is what we used to do. This is how we used to do it. But we're going to also change it because it's 2024. I'm not going to do it in certain ways. Now I can put different iconography, and this is talking about capitalism. He has one really, watch the film. You'll see there's two bears, one inverted to each other, and he describes all of the icons and all the things in the pole. And he says he has a bear on one side with a tongue and a human underneath with the same tongue. And that is to show Indigenous and the idea that Indigenous culture is being eaten alive by capitalism. And it's really, really intriguing and beautiful. And you'd never know it if you didn't like study it or ask questions. So that's really kind of the point of, you know, doing this, is asking questions and seeing what answers you get out of it. So anyways, before I stop, and I will, thankfully, you'll be proud that I'm stopping. I want to show you real quick two things. I'm not like hawking my book, but if anything in this presentation, because I only have a short amount of time, usually I take 16 weeks to unpack these concepts, right? This is a lot of stuff that I just threw at you. And I'm hoping that I hit all of the high water marks, right? But I have a book, my first one, this is the Deconstruction of Chief Blackhawk. This is very specifically about the argument of mascotry, right? We've had a lot of talk in recent years, of course, about the Cleveland Indians and the Washington Redskins changing their names, thankfully. We also have the Kansas City Chiefs and the Atlanta Braves, which float under the radar, but even below that radar line, we have the Chicago Blackhawks. And that is the only specific mascot that you can trace to an actual historical figure all the way through. So, but if you are interested in kind of the academic theory side of what I'm talking about, I have copies here. You can find it on my website. You can find it anywhere that you can buy your books as well. But the one thing I would like to stress, if you are, and I will humbly request that you do, but if you are moved by this, I do have a petition at change.org. I think we have around 15,000 signatures right now. Please go to this site if you are in support of changing the mascot of the Chicago Blackhawks. There's some really, really cool stuff by an Ojibwe artist, Mike Eval, who actually proposed a new logo, and Wirtz, the owner, he's since passed now, but Rocky Wirtz rejected it. And they have since rejected any change, and they said they'll never change their mascot. So that's a problem. But that's a problem for another day. You can read about it, but please go and sign the petition if you would, and share it freely. You can find this on my website as well. So awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Apachigo miigwech bizendawieg. Thank you so much for listening. Do you have any questions, or is there anything that I'm going to put my information back up there for you. Cool. Oh yeah, I have raised hands. I'm sorry, I forgot. All of a sudden you took me back to class. Yes. Barb?
Deborah.
Deborah.
But if people confuse my name, they almost always say Barb or Barbara.
Oh,
So
okay.
anyway.
You can call me Jeff.
That works. So I used to buy things made by Indigenous people from, like when I was out west, along the roadside.
Sure.
So I'm taking from what you said, like I'm questioning, or I got an ash basket when I was up in Mount Pleasant at a native owned and run store.
Sure.
So is that for the people, or is that capitalism? Well, yes, because I'm directly supporting artists, whether they're commercial artists or not. Then now I go to mostly cultural centers owned and run by tribes.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they have all sorts of contemporary artwork, they sell stuff.
Sure.
What do you think of any of that?
Okay, so a dear friend of mine, Dave Schnadequat, he's an amazing painter. He lost to COVID, unfortunately. I was talking to him about birch bark etching, And he was relating a story to me. He uses an X-Acto knife, or used, of course, but an X-Acto knife, right? And he had somebody come up and kind of give him heat for it. That's not traditional. And he's like, it's like 2018.
Right.
Like, do you honestly think that they wouldn't use modern technology? This is easier than taking, like an awl and doing it.
Right.
So he's like, as long as you're doing it with the right intentions,
Okay.
then he's like, it's just artwork. I'm still just making it. Looking out at the exhibit out here, beautiful glass pieces. Glass is not, and I'm thankful that they talked about Chiculi and Chiculi, not being native, right? Introducing it to the Art Institute. Having these techniques, though, as an art teacher or an art professor, the medium is just a message to me, and I think people think too much about the medium itself. I think that we need to incorporate it. I think we need to definitely acknowledge what the medium is and how it moves the narrative forward. But I think we focus too much on this is traditional. This is not traditional. What's traditional? It's 2024. I don't even know. Like a glass totem pole is definitely not traditional. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. And I have a feeling that it was made with the right intentions.
Yeah.
Right? So at that point, is it made for the capitalist society? I think, yeah, by default, because we're in it.
Right.
I don't think we can escape it. But what we can do is talk about it, we can highlight it, we can critique it.
Yeah.
Right? Not necessarily criticize. I don't know if we can, we can do all of these things. We're not going to stop capitalism today. We're not going to stop capitalism tomorrow. Right? But we can start talking about it so we can change how we want to operate within it. Yes.
Okay, the American Progress
Yes.
is in the Autry
The
Museum.
Yes.
As in Gene
Autry. The Gene Autry Museum.
I would believe, it's spelled the same way. And the other thing is, I just finished reading a book, which anyone who's interested more, is called Native Nations by Catherine Duvall.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it's absolutely fabulous, because it's 1,000 years of history, life, vibrant, ongoing. It's wonderful.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to follow you up on books or suggestions as well. If you want to look at contemporary Native artists, a really good book. I don't remember the author's name off the top of my noggin. You can expect me to remember everything, but it's called The Trickster Ship is the name of the book. And it is really, really good kind of overview of contemporary Indigenous artists and how they're fighting colonialism, how they fight all of these topics that we're talking about. And it's got some really, really good interviews with the artists themselves. So The Trickster Ship, it's a large tabletop book, full colored prints. So really, really good. Really good book.
Native Nations.
Any other questions? Or, if you, obviously putting me on the spot, if you do, my contact information is here. You're always more than welcome to reach out at any point in time. I would be more than happy to answer any questions or to send you bibliographies or anything you need from me. That's what I do. So, yes, ma'am.
In the introduction, you said you work with food reclamation.
Sure, yes.
That is bringing back foods.
Yeah, so one of the documentaries that I was lucky enough to work on with Mariano Avila and Lynn Bardwell is a 4-part series called Shaping Narratives. And it was a 4-part docu-series, and it is based around foods, right? Food sovereignties and growing foods. In one episode, we make a traditional Three Sisters garden, right? So we're trying to figure out what does a 21st century Indian look like? How do we do these things living in a condominium? You know what I mean? In this particular episode, Lynn, my friend, she doesn't have a garden. So she's like, God, that's like, shouldn't I have one? Like, isn't that what we're supposed to do? So it's these conversations. So it was going through the process of her starting the very first garden, right? And so it's really, really cool.
With more foods that they used to eat.
Yes, correct. The three sisters, and she got the seeds all from Michigan. If you go to pbs.org, you can find it just pbs.org and then Shaping Narratives. And like I said, there's actually a fifth episode. It's like a behind the scenes thing, but there's 4 episodes.
Just for anybody who might want to know, at the Kalamazoo Nature Center right now,
It's
there's
wonderful.
a very interesting exhibit about native foods all around the country and how they've been hijacked and commercialized by big business. And efforts to reclaim the native ways in the production of these foods, production and marketing.
Sure, most definitely. A lot of the Great Lakes Lifeway Institute does a lot of the intertribal food summits. And when they say intertribal, they mean from the North Pole to the southern tip of Argentina. They will have chefs come to this symposium. It's a weekish long, usually event. They'll have workshops and they'll have native cuisines from up and down this continent. So amazing. I had my wife and my youngest son try some foods. I didn't tell them what they were first. And they're like, "Oh man, this is like the sweetest meat I've ever had." It was looked like pulled pork. You know, it was great. We trapped and smoked a beaver, skinned and smoked it, and beaver meat is amazing. It's like candy. So super cool. But they have like workshops where you go forage and harvest your food, and then they prepare it for the next meal. Plant identification and those types of things. There are gatherings around that focus on recentering around food sovereignty. So, because ultimately food is our medicine, right? So, wild rice cultivation. Roger Lebin has been an amazing advocate for repopulating the wild rice beds and the Monoman beds around the state of Michigan. He's been on NPR and Michigan Public Radio a gazillion times. And Roger's the most humbling, warm, friendly gentleman if you've ever met him. He's like this tall, but he fills the room. He's just, personality's amazing. So that's kind of what the food thing is. Any other questions or?
Big witch.
Hey, So what you cart before the horse. Another language. Let's say, I was gonna say thank you all for coming out, but miigwech is thank you. Miigwech. Bamapi. Thank you all. See you later. If you have any questions, please feel free to give me a holler. Or if you'd like my book, I'll give you all a discount. So, thank you.